When he moved into the White House, when he became Secretary of State, he brought with him as a consultant David Rockefeller. I've talked to some of his secretaries who say that when Henry Kissinger was out of the office, he would sometimes get called by the President of the United States. And he might also, during that same period, get a call from Nelson Rockefeller. When he returned, he would always call Rockefeller first. He met his wife, Nancy McGinnis, through the Rockefeller. Their engagement was announced not by the McGinnis family, not by the Kissinger family. It was announced by the Rockefeller. They went on their honeymoon in a plane, personal plane provided by the Rockefeller. I've been able to trace one $50,000 payment from the Rockefellers to Henry Kissinger while he was Secretary of State. When he left the State Department, he returned openly to the Rockefeller payroll. He's now chairman of the International Advisory Committee of the Chase Manhattan Bank. I think that background might be interesting when I give you a little history that he does not challenge. He started to. And you might be interested in the little colloquy that occurred. When I called him to ask him certain embarrassing questions on this subject, the high price of oil, he said, Jack, would you show me where you are getting your information? I said, certainly. You come on over, we'll show you what we have and let you respond to anything you wish. He sent his top man, Bill Hyland, who looked at all the secret documents we had accumulated on the subject, and after he did, he shook his head and said, someone must have given you the whole computer printout on this subject. And so we used the story, and there was no comment from Henry Kissinger. What was the story? The story is as follows. In 1972, Kissinger foresaw that we would become heavily dependent on Persian Gulf oil. He also perceived, or this is the way he explained it to me, that the American people would not support a military buildup in the Persian Gulf, not after the sour experience in Vietnam. Though our stakes in Vietnam were nothing compared to our stakes in the Persian Gulf. And so he proposed to President Nixon that we call upon the Shah of Iran to become the guardian, the protector of U.S. interests in the Persian Gulf. And in early 1972, Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger flew to Tehran, and they asked the Shah if he would become the guardian of American interests in the Persian Gulf. He was glad to do it. He had delusions of grandeur anyhow. He looked forward to building up the Persian Empire again. And so he said, yes, he would be glad to do it, provided that we would supply the weaponry that he needed. Nixon and Kissinger told him he had a blank check. He could order anything he wanted, and we would ship it there. And he ordered the most sophisticated weapons in our arsenal. So sophisticated that the Iranian military armed forces couldn't operate them. We had to send 75,000 instructors over there and advisors over there to teach them how to run the stuff. Another question came up in April of 1972. This was a logical question. The Shah said, if I am to become the guardian of American interests in the Persian Gulf, and I am to purchase American weapons in order to do so, who's going to pay for them? Kissinger and Nixon said the American people, because of the Vietnam War, would not be inclined to do so. Now, the record doesn't show, the documents in my possession don't show, who made this suggestion, but it had to be one of the three. And all three of them concurred. One of them suggested that the thing to do would be to triple or quadruple oil prices and to purchase the weapons out of the proceeds. And in 72, when that meeting broke up, there was a consensus that the Shah of Iran would begin to clamor for a multiplication of oil prices, and that the United States would support him. Not openly, but quietly. And he began a campaign. And when he started clamoring for oil prices, I've seen the documents, we got urgent messages from Saudi Arabia. See, the OPEC in those days was dominated by two countries. They were the two greatest oil exporters. The Saudi documents, the Saudi secret documents, happily both Saudi Arabia and Iran were stalwart allies of the United States. And so we seem to be in a good position. And the Saudis, assuming that we'd be concerned, and knowing that the Shah was a megalomaniac and sometimes had these strange visions and made these wild statements, sent us a flurry of messages to assure us that they would not go along with the increase in oil prices, to assure us that they would hold prices down. But they also pointed out that we had placed the Shah in power, that we ought to have enough influence to shut him up. And so they suggested that if we would just shut the Shah up, because he was stirring up all the oil-producing nations, that if we would quiet him, that they would cooperate with us in keeping oil prices down. Well, to shorten the story, we didn't cooperate, because we had this secret agreement with the Shah. We not only didn't cooperate, we quietly allowed him to go ahead until it became so obvious that the Saudis sent us a message saying, well, it's clear to us that you want the oil prices because you would have shut him up by now. And we assume, therefore, that you want higher prices. We, therefore, will be happy to oblige. And on January 1st, 1974, oil prices were quadrupled. There was a howl of outrage across the world, and the loudest ones came from the United States. The one who howled the loudest here was the Secretary of the Treasury, William Simon. Well, the Saudis, when they heard Simon, when they heard others in the United States screaming, sent another flurry of messages saying, we assumed you wanted the high prices. We had offered to hold them down. We had asked you to keep the Shah under control. If you can keep the Shah under control, if in fact you don't like these high prices, we will roll them back. And a very happy William Simon flew to Riyadh and negotiated the rollback. Negotiated it. My friends, it was announced. It was announced in July of 1974. The rollback was announced. Simon told me that he came back and triumphantly explained what he had accomplished to President Nixon. He said Nixon took some notes on a long sheet of yellow paper. But he said he had the impression that Nixon was so absorbed by Watergate that he wasn't really functioning on other subjects. He said the subject came up at cabinet meetings. Kissinger always opposed him. He never understood why. We never did deliver. We never did shut up the Shah. The Shah continued to scream, or to clamor for even higher oil prices, until the Saudis, outraged, having negotiated a rollback, sent us word that the whole thing was off. And they canceled the rollback that they had negotiated and announced. So we not only could have stopped the oil increase, we could have brought the prices back down after the increase had occurred. And we did not do it. Now, I have given you the background of Henry Kissinger. This benefited the Shah, but it also benefited Standard Oil of New Jersey. And that bothers me. And when I raised it with Henry Kissinger, he says, I'm outraged that you would even make the suggestion. He says, I was doing what I thought was best for the United States. He says, I didn't even consider what the benefits might be to the Rockefellers. Maybe so. But it bothers me. It troubles me. The Rockefellers have benefited. The Shah benefited temporarily. And I really am not going to take the time to go into his downfall and the reasons for it, except to tell you that Jimmy Carter inherited the mess, and except to tell you that he made it worse.
In closing, I make 1 minute. When federal judges remove God from the Pledge of Allegiance, federal judges welcome Satan. Not just fear. And from fear and distrust comes hate. And God Almighty, where are we going to end up? Very few people vote in America as it is.